Hola a todos, aquí Esther Galindo de Antum, dando paso a la segunda entrevista con Phil Maffetone, donde le pido que describa con sus propias palabras qué es MAF, MAF, MAF Coaching y quién se puede beneficiar de ello. Gracias por estar ahí. What would you say you are using to get to that MAF, so that maximum aerobic function? Because I know, well, I think I know it is through nutrition, proper nutrition, adequate, optimal movement, activity, physical activity, depending on the condition of the person. And then, of course, this sleep, recovery, let's say rest, which is so important, and many people have forgotten about it at all because they are always on the run, they are stressed, they can train anyway and race on the weekends, and still they don't get the recovery they need. And that's why they think they're doing well, and then they discover that they are doing all wrong. And that was my case because I was overtrained, I was stressed out, and of course I couldn't even get a very good night's sleep, although I was sleeping many hours, and I was still feeling very exhausted even in the morning.
Right. Sleep quality, and quantity are very important. But just to back up, to continue with the model, the answer to that question is that we address the physical, the biochemical, and the mental, emotional aspects of health and fitness. The stresses, so to speak, they're really all stresses. Mm-hmm. And everyone is different. We all have different physical, biochemical, mental, emotional stressors that affect us, and we have to deal with them in our own unique ways. And so that's really the thrust of what MAF does for people. It helps make them aware of these things. And many people, when you mention stress, they immediately think of mental stress. Mm-hmm. Well, sure, we all relate to that, but physical stress and biochemical stress are equally important. And some of those stresses we're not going to be able to get rid of. But I could guarantee you that most of those stresses that affect us, we can get rid of. And the game is to get rid of the stresses we can get rid of, and then we can adapt to the stresses we don't get rid of. And because we have a mechanism in the brain that affects the body that helps us adapt to stress every day. Mm-hmm. But when that system is overwhelmed, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah, for sure. I could feel that, and I've been finding out in my own clients. It's quite amazing when you start doing things well, by eating well and training maybe slower because you need that at this point. You are resting better, and then you can really get to along with your life better because you can handle it. I mean, you are still having problems and issues, but your brain is more relaxed somehow, and you can approach things better. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, people, in our society, people focus on the one thing that they do. So if you're a runner, you focus on running, and you almost neglect your family and your job. Mm-hmm. and the rest of your life because you're a runner. You focus on running. And if you're a tennis player or a golfer, this is your focus. It's okay to have a really good focus on things, but not at the expense of other parts of your life. And if you don't want those parts of your life, get rid of them. Yeah. If you hate your job, find another one that you like. So there's this this process of assessment that people need to go through where they need to say, well, I've got these physical stresses, these biochemical stresses, and these mental, emotional stresses. I can get rid of those and then deal with the rest while I get even more healthy and fit along the way.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, I think that clarifies something to most people, because of course they could see the MAF and they know this is for functional maximum aerobic function, but still they didn't have a clue about what was all about.
Well, a lot of times it's the lack of the big picture, and again, we don't in our society we don't think holistically. Often we think, MAF is about slow running, or MAF is about a low carb diet, or MAF is about I don't know what. I try not to look to see what people are thinking, but it's none of those. It's actually all those things. Well, not necessarily, because some people complain they have to run too fast.
Yeah.
And not everyone needs to be on a low carbohydrate diet.
Yeah.
There are some basic rules, the basic human rules. Eating junk food is something humans should never do, period. And there's a consensus about that in the scientific community and the clinical community, unless you work for a junk food company. Nobody says, well, we're not sure if junk food is bad. The tobacco industry still says that about smoking cigarettes. They say, well, it hasn't been proven yet. They really do say that. And so we need to separate out all of that hype and look at the big picture, because if you're an athlete and your goal is to run faster and to be a better marathoner, you can do that without hurting yourself. Mm-hmm. And if your goal is to lose excess body fat, you can do that without starving yourself, and so on and so forth. And it's, I often say it's really, really easy, because it is. On paper, it's really easy. But if you're addicted to sugar, that's not easy. An easy thing to go through. I've gone through it. You've gone through it.
Yeah.
If you socialize a lot with your sports friends, going out for a Sunday long ride or run with everyone else may be a little difficult, because you may have to, in the beginning, run slower than all of them, who are running way too fast in many cases because they're competing with each other. But in time, you'll be keeping up with them at a much lower heart rate and then passing them in races. So your goals are not going to be ignored. Your approach to doing it is going to be a balanced approach, a healthy and fit approach, and from that comes a better quality of life. Aging better. If you love running marathons and you want to do it until you're 110 and win that 110 category, go for it.
So maybe that's also one of the worst parts for many people, is that they have really to take responsibility for what they do. And many of us put this power out of ourselves. Oh, it's my team or my family or whatever, and I cannot let them down, so to say. But we are actually letting us down when we are accepting to do certain things that we know
exactly
are not good for us. Yeah.
And you said the key word, responsibility. We are all responsible for our health and fitness. more than anyone or anything else. We're in charge. It's not our doctor, our health practitioner. It's not the insurance companies or the government. We're in charge. We might hire a doctor, hire a health practitioner, hire a coach, and that can help guide us along the way, or that can give us information, good or bad, and over time we accumulate this information and we start thinking more for ourselves, and that responsibility factor becomes more and more effective.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well,
I didn't say it was easy. Did I say it was easy?
No, you never said that. And I never say it. I don't say it either. Yeah. And I know it isn't. It isn't. But
it's not that it's difficult. It's different from what people are used to. When people say, "Oh, I'm gaining too much weight. I'm going to go on a diet," or "I'm not as fast as my friends. I need to do intervals," because this is the mentality. That makes the MAF approach not something that's easy in the beginning. But once you get over that, once you get over the fact that you need to rebuild your aerobic system, which means you might have to start training slower, or you need to eat differently, and the sugar issue I mentioned, and any change we make is difficult. Change is hard for the brain, but it's not a long, drawn-out, difficult thing to do. It's usually the initial aspects of it. Some of those difficulties linger on in the brain. Giving up sugar. During the 2-week test, for example, people give up sugar, and by the end of a week or two, they're okay. But it takes years and years before you could walk past a bakery and not be drawn in by the sights and smells. And the brain has that memory, and to override that is something that is not easy, but will happen.
Mm-hmm. We both know it happens at some point. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. I always say as well that even though it sounds a little bit esoteric or something like that, it's like once you go through MAF, you get to know yourself better, and you know your signs and symptoms, and you can relate to them when you are not feeling that good. That's the best thing I found out. And also, it's like you are recovering your instinct as what food is good for you, and should I rest today more or less? Can I go harder today on this training? That's the best part, but it comes a little bit later, of course, after a while.
Yeah, and it's a good point you make about instincts. We have them, but they've been suppressed in part by the great society, the great hoax that's out there on every level, food and exercise in particular, because food makes companies very rich, like the tobacco companies. The junk food companies are the biggest conglomerates out there, and exercise, which everything from running shoes to race fees, subscriptions, and all the junk, literally junk food that they sell to athletes.